it happen, then, that so many of the tote windows were blocked in the way that has been described?
It was the IRA, wasn't it? Monaghan and his gang of paddies.
You had not planned this with Monaghan?
Well, I wouldn't say planned. It was like I said, we'd met in the pub the week before, and I was telling him how I fancied these two dogs and how I didn't think that I'd get much of a price for them. And we was talking about manipulating prices. Well, let's face it, manipulating prices, punters and bookers, it's been going on for yonks. So he said how he might like to help me and he'd get a few of his lads. Well, he was working on this big building site, you see. He said, well, I'll get the lads from Kerry and I'll get a few of the boys from, I don't know, Lochinvar, some Irish part. Anyway, he said, with them, you'll be able to get as much money as you want on. So we had a bit of a talk and a bit of a laugh. I didn't think any more about it. You know, it was one of those talks you have in a pub. And McGinty, he wasn't even in on it. Anyway, when I got down there, I couldn't believe it.
When you got to the track, there were how many men there willing to help you in placing money?
Well, there was 5 of us, and there was Monaghan and his mates, about a dozen of them, and there was about half a dozen people I knew from old times, like, you know.
Acquaintances?
Yeah, I suppose it was about 23, 24 all told.
How was it then that with so many unexpected helpers, you had sufficient money to go round?
Well, I had a century each for us, so that's 500. So instead, we had about 40 each, and we give the hounds about a score each, something like that. But, I mean, it was so unplanned, though. I mean, it wasn't true. I found myself handing out fivers like they was potato crisps. It was just as well we didn't try to get the money on alone, though. I mean, those ladies down there, I mean, they are that slow. And nothing personal, love, but, I mean, it's chronic. I mean, half of them don't know a greyhound from a goldfish, and the other half are deaf. You say 5 and 4, please, lady. They say, sorry, me watch is stopped. I mean, it's like a geriatric ward. All except you, of course, darling.
Kindly restrict yourself to the matters in hand, Mr. Broad.
Sorry, my lord. Anyway, I mean, we just wouldn't have even got 100 on a combination like that. No chance.
Mr. Broad, was it ever your intention to prevent other people from betting?
We didn't come into it.
It was at no time part of your plan to prevent others betting?
No, it would have helped us, as it happens.
Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, if more people had betted, the dividend wouldn't have been so high. So we wouldn't have had all this hollering.
Could you please explain exactly what you mean by that?
Well, the dividend was £47. And that was on, that was on about 10 winning tickets, was it?
No, there were 14 units on the winning combination with a projected win dividend of 47, which is a book price of 2 to 1, as compared with trap number 3, with a projected win dividend of 40 to 1 and a book price of 20 to 1.
Mrs. Troughton, I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but evidence from the body of the court is not admissible. The jury will erase from their minds anything that they have understood. Go on, please.
Thank you, my lord. Well, anyway, I mean, supposing it had been 14 winning tickets, supposing it had been about 50 winning tickets, well, then the dividend would have been about £8 or £9. And you would have said, oh, unexpectedly large dividend. But you wouldn't have invoked the law of the land, that's a certainty.
No, I see. So, in fact, you could say that your hopes were destroyed by a lack of planning.
It's too true.
To what extent were you taking a chance, Mr. Broad, or were you indeed gambling when you embarked on this venture?
Well, to every extent. I already had 500 down the Swanee if those dogs lost.
Was anyone who helped you to place bets paid for doing so?
No.
No one received any payment of any kind?
No. Oh, I bought them a drink.
Before or after the race?
Before. And 24 bottles of Guinness.
Mr. Broad, did it at any time occur to you that you should not do this because it was dishonest?
Never.
Do you consider that it was dishonest?
Well, how can it be dishonest? I mean, the bookie arranges the odds in his favour all the time. So I've got no qualms if I, as a punter, can go out and get myself some decent odds on a decent bet.
Thank you, Mr. Broad.
And even then, the bookmaker wins. I mean, he just don't pay. Do you reckon, ladies and gentlemen, that if you find in my favour, he'll pay? Never.
I
Mr.
offered
Broad.
you your steak back.
I don't want me steak back.
Gentlemen.
Sorry, my lord.
Very well, Mr. Dealey. You're ready.
You seem to have extremely high principles that made you turn your back on bookmaking. It was that bent it disgusted me. But this squeamishness doesn't appear to have affected you when it comes to equally dubious practices as a punter.
Well, it ain't equally dubious. You're beating the book.
Well, I could perceive nothing to distinguish the manipulation of odds that you perpetrated at Oak Grove from the manipulation that you pretended to abhor earlier on in your testimony as performed by bookmakers. Is there indeed any distinction that you could point to?
Well, the difference is, which I'm surprised you don't realise, that they're doing it all the time. So you've got to do it back when you get a chance.
So you don't abhor it at all, do you? As long as you're doing it.
Well, it's the game, isn't it?
And all your earlier testimony, your pious attitude, going over to the other side, was all just eyewash.
Well, it is disgusting to me when you're always claiming all the time that you stand to lose as much as the punter, when everything's arranged so much by you as the bookie that you can't lose, in fact.
Oh, Mr. Broad, it's all very tortuous. You must forgive me if I doubt your sincerity.
You're forgiven.
Mr. Broad, you've asked this court to believe.
I've told this court.
All right, you've told this court. And in doing so, you've asked them to believe. But there's no compulsion. That you went down to Oak Grove on the afternoon in question, and there you met no less than 20 people who were willing to help you place bets merely by chance.
Well, not by chance.
Well, almost by chance. 6 of them, you say, completely by chance.
Well, I'm bound to meet someone I know at any big dog track. I've been at the game that long.
But, Mr. Broad, 20? Now, I put it to you, Mr. Broad, that you arranged with these people to be there, and for a very specific purpose.
Look, I met Monan at about 2:30, and we went into the bar, and his lads were sort of wandering about, and I asked if he could get them to help. And those that agreed, I gave about a score to, and that was it.
And how many of them disagreed?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if any of them did.
No, because if they're going to disagree, they wouldn't have been there in the first place, would they, Mr. Broad?
Well, maybe he'd mentioned something to them. I don't know.
Oh, surely it must have been apparent that they knew what they were there for. They'd been prepared. Look, how could they have cooperated in such an over-successful operation?
I told you I don't know, and I don't really... Well, I'm not supposed to say that, am I?
You don't really care? Fair enough. And so, Mr. Broad, you say that in order to put this money on, you used the services of 24 of your friends, 24 men, and yet you say it was not your intention to block the windows of the tote.
Well, it wasn't.
Did it not occur to you that there would have been an easier way to have put this money on?
No?
No, because in that way you would not have blocked the windows, would you?
What way?
How long have you been around racing, Mr. Broad?
Oh, all my life.
15 or 20 years. And it didn't occur to you that you could have gone to the manageress of the tote to put this money on?
No, it didn't. Why should I?
To let other people bet, Mr. Broad.
Oh, do leave off. I mean, it's one thing to be fair, but you don't want to end up cutting your own throat, do you?
Ah, so it was your intention to prevent other people from betting then?
Well, let me put it this way. I knew that if I could get my money on the outsiders, it would prevent people from putting their money on the favourites, and that's what I wanted.
Thank you, Mr. Broad. I think we can at least agree on that point, although we may express ourselves differently. There was one thing you said, though, Mr. Broad, that puzzled me.
Go on.
Well, you said you didn't realise that the forecast would come out so high, that the dividend would be so large.
$250,000, I didn't.
And yet we've heard that there is an indicator board to give you just such information on display by law. So how come you did not realise?
Well, I didn't look at the indicator. I didn't think to check, to be honest.
Is it not far more likely that you did check it? And that you were very glad to see how few tickets had been sold on your forecast?
No.
And it wasn't until you realised that the bookmaker was going to refuse to pay out on your deliberately rigged forecast that you were full of self-congratulation.
Well, I was pleased it had come off, but he should pay by law.
Mr. Broad, you have said nothing to weaken the impression that the whole of this thing was a carefully and deliberately planned conspiracy, both in its nature and intention, fraudulent and dishonest.
God help us. Well, I'm glad it's them that's going to have to decide.
Thank you, Mr. Broad.
Thank you.
Very well, officer.
I call Patrick McGinty, my lord.